Ever catch yourself kind of lost in thought about the big stuff? Like, what's out there? Is there a God? What's even real? We've been getting some super interesting stuff about all that, and you know what? Today we're diving right in.
Oh, for sure.
We've got some excerpts from a book, My Search for God, by this Dr. Ramesh Kushwaha, and it's got us thinking about his whole journey, and the framework he came up with to understand God and the soul and all that.
It really is fascinating, isn't it? The way he takes his own experiences and then builds this whole system for understanding these huge, like, existential questions.
Yeah, and it's not just theory, right? It comes from his own life, from him starting with these really traditional beliefs and then questioning everything.
Absolutely. It's like he goes from
Yeah.
believer to skeptic to something else entirely. And that's what we're going to unpack today, that journey and where it leads him.
Exactly. If we'll start with his upbringing, all that religious stuff, then we'll look at how he started doubting, looking for proof.
The turning point, right.
Yeah, and then we'll see how all these different religions and science ideas shaped his thinking. And then finally, we'll get to the heart of it, his two-reality framework.
Which is really something else.
Yeah.
But first, let's rewind back to his childhood.
Okay, so picture this. Northern India, traditional Hindu family. Dr. Kushwaha talks about being immersed in religion from day one.
Totally. Temples, rituals, the whole 9 yards, reading the Ramayana.
Oh, yeah, the stories.
Exactly. It's like a textbook example of a devout upbringing.
Yeah, and he talks about these temple visits. It wasn't just going through the motions for him. There was this, hope tied to it.
Oh, yeah, I get it. Like praying for things, right?
Exactly. Good grades, a good job, a house, all that stuff. So he was definitely a believer back then.
Makes sense. It's how a lot of us start, right? You just kind of absorb the beliefs you grow up with.
Mm.
But then things changed, especially when he became a teenager.
That's when the logic kicked in. He started asking those tough questions. Like, can these idols really help me pass an exam?
Haha. The idol.
And what about those natural disasters? Is that God's doing? And then even bigger questions about life and death, like, why are we here? What happens after? Heavy stuff for a teenager to be wrestling with.
No kidding. It's like questioning the whole system.
Yeah.
So what happened when he asked these questions? What did the religious leaders tell him?
They kept saying God was real and he's in control. They use this chair analogy a lot, like a chair needs a maker, so the world needs a creator, and that's God.
Classic argument. Design implies a designer.
Yeah, and that fit with the whole Hindu worldview where God is like the ultimate puppeteer.
Right. But then there's that Gandhi quote that really messed with him. God helps those who help themselves.
That one's a curveball. If you got to help yourself, then what's God even doing?
Yeah, that throws a wrench in the whole predetermined destiny thing.
Totally. So he gets all scientific about it, starts documenting everything, like what happens when he prays, what happens when he doesn't.
That's pretty hardcore, keeping tabs on God like that. Did he find anything?
At first, he thought so. For a bit, it seemed like good things happened when he prayed. But then it all went random. Prayers, no prayers, good stuff, bad stuff, no connection.
Interesting. It's like that illusion of patterns we see sometimes.
Yeah, and that was a big turning point. He became a full-on rebel. No more temples, started demanding proof for God.
A teenage atheist. That can be a tough phase.
His friends even called him an atheist, which he was fine with. But he was still kind of scared inside, Like, what if he was wrong?
The weight of tradition. It's hard to shake off those deep-rooted fears.
And then his uncle's little kid, 2 years old, gets really sick.
Yeah.
Devastating. And everyone's saying it's karma from a past life.
That's rough, blaming a baby for past sins.
It didn't sit right with him at all. The whole karma thing just seemed unfair. So he shifted again, more like an agnostic this time. No opinion on God, just unsure.
I don't know zone.
Yeah, but still kind of worried about being wrong. He even mentions Thomas Huxley's definition of an agnostic, someone who just doesn't know.
Right. But I heard he also thought about, finding something spiritual in nature.
Oh, yeah, like Buddha under the Bodhi tree. But that didn't really pan out. Then he started thinking about all the different gods out there, different religions.
That's a whole other rabbit hole. So many to choose from.
Right. And even within Hinduism, Lakshmi, Saraswati, Hanuman, Krishna, Durga, Indra. You got rivers, mountains, cows, everything being worshipped.
It's wild, right? What even is God at that point?
He realized it wasn't about proving or disproving God anymore. The question was more like, what is this higher power if there is one? And what about the soul? Reincarnation. He wanted to understand it all.
Okay, so he's moving beyond that black and white thinking. It's getting more nuanced. He's diving into the philosophy of it all.
Yeah, and he's reading everything he can get his hands on. Swami Vivekananda, Acharya Rajneesh, Ramakrishna Paramahansa, Paramahansa Yogananda. He's trying to grasp this idea that God is inside us, but it's not clicking yet.
That's a tough one to wrap your head around.
Totally. And then there's reincarnation and karma. He's looking at how good karma can lead to better future lives. Being born a human instead of like a rat or a bug.
Or even a rock, right?
Right. And then he compares that to Christianity and Islam. One life, heaven or hell, Jesus and Allah at the center.
Totally different systems.
Mm.
And it's not just those three, right? He mentions Buddhism and Jainism too.
Yeah.
No creator God, but
Mhm.
they still have souls and reincarnation.
Yeah, it's all about what happens after we die. And that got him thinking about the soul itself. Where is it? What is it made of? What happens when we die? Can it be inherited? These are questions people have been asking forever.
No easy answers there.
Yeah.
And some people have even tried to, scientifically prove the soul's existence.
Yeah, like that Dr. Duncan McDougall experiment where he weighed dying patients, trying to see if the soul had weight that left when they died.
I remember reading about that. It was even in the New York Times. But didn't that theory turn out to be, totally wrong?
Yeah, the science just doesn't back it up. And then there's Dr. Ian Stevenson, who studied kids claiming to remember past lives.
Those are pretty wild stories.
Right. Kids giving details about people they never met, things that sometimes turned out to be true. Stevenson thought it was evidence for reincarnation.
But, most scientists aren't buying it. They say it could be suggestibility, false memories, coincidences, or even inherited memories, which is a whole other can of worms.
Yeah, so no real proof for reincarnation. So then we get into all this stuff about ghosts, spirits, possessions, out-of-body experiences, stuff that people say points to a soul outside the body.
Right, like that whole spiritualism craze in the 19th century. People were obsessed with contacting the dead.
It was huge. Ouija boards, seances, whole journals dedicated to it. And it wasn't just regular folks.
Yeah, remember all those big names who were into it?
Edison, Tesla, Pierre Curie. Even Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, the Sherlock Holmes guy, he was giving presentations on psychic stuff. It was a wild time.
Yeah. And then you got spirit possession, which has been around forever. People believing they're being controlled by some other entity.
Yeah, and out-of-body experiences, those OBEs, where people feel like their consciousness is floating outside their body. Seems like proof of a soul, right?
Well, Susan Blackmore studied those in her book Beyond the Body. She ended up thinking OBEs were more like altered states of consciousness, weird brain stuff, not a real soul leaving the body.
Like when your brain is in a totally different mode.
Right. And now we even have neuroscience backing that up. Dr. Joseph Provisi at Stanford found this part of the brain, the precuneus, that's involved in feeling like you're in your body.
So that's where the feeling of me being in my body comes from, and it messes up during OBEs. So it's more like a brain glitch than a soul taking a trip.
Makes sense. So after all this religious stuff and paranormal stuff, Dr. Kushwaha went full-on science mode, right?
Yep. After electrical engineering, he goes for biomedical engineering in Canada.
The brain stuff. He was getting into the nitty-gritty.
Big time. That led him to a Ph.D. at the University of Michigan, where he really got deep into the mind.
And that's when those questions about God and the soul popped up again.
Totally. He's in the library studying science, but he's also digging into religion, metaphysics, paranormal stuff. Trying to reconcile it all, I guess.
Trying to bridge those two worlds. And he was talking to other students about it too, right? How come mystical experiences don't make sense scientifically?
Yeah, and science can't really explain those experiences either. He was also learning about Abrahamic religions during this time, expanding his horizons.
He's really going all in on this. And he points out something interesting about how research on the mind was kind of slow for a while.
Yeah, for a couple hundred years after Descartes, people didn't want to mess with it too much, scared of clashing with religion.
It's like science had to tiptoe around faith for a while.
Right. And back then, mental health issues were dealt with by churches or, in India, by gurus and tantrics. Mental hospitals didn't really become a thing until the 19th century.
Things have changed a lot since then. By the late 20th century, research on the mind was booming. The decade of the brain in the 90s was huge.
And that's when those new atheists came along, and the spiritual but not religious folks, and the knowns who don't follow any religion.
It's a whole new landscape of belief or non-belief.
And Buddhism is getting popular in the West, and Christianity is getting challenged by science. but there are still more books about Christianity than all other religions and atheism combined. It's crazy.
That's pretty wild. And then there's that Pew Templeton survey he mentions, the one about global religious demographics.
Oh, yeah, that one. Christians were the biggest group, then Muslims, then Hindus, and a good chunk of people don't identify with any religion.
It's a diverse world out there, spiritually speaking. And as he says, there are so many different ideas about God. No one really agrees.
Totally. Theists, atheists, agnostics, everyone's got their own take. He even mentions the new atheists who think religion is the root of all evil.
So after all that exploration, he comes up with his own big idea, the two-reality framework.
This is where it all comes together. He basically says there are two realities, the external physical one and the internal virtual one.
Two realities. Okay, let's unpack that. The external one is the universe.
Right.
It's existing out there.
Yeah, like the real deal. And he says it's eternal, always expanding and contracting. The Big Bang was just one moment in that cycle.
Like a cosmic heartbeat. And some astrophysicists even agree with that, you know?
Yeah, it's a mind-blowing concept. And then there's us, living beings. We perceive this universe with our senses, and we build a virtual model of it in our brains.
Like a mental map of reality.
Exactly. And here's where it gets really interesting. He says that each of us is the creator god of our own internal virtual universe.
Whoa. So we're all mini-gods of our own minds.
In a way, yeah. But here's the thing. The external world still exists, even if we're not looking at it.
Like the tree in the forest falling. It still makes a sound, even if no one's there to hear it.
Exactly. But our experience of that world is filtered through our own perception, and he makes this distinction between the objective stuff, like data you can measure, and the subjective stuff, like our feelings.
Like you can't measure happiness with a ruler.
Totally. And that's where he says those physical laws, like quantum mechanics and relativity, only apply to the external world, not our internal virtual one.
So like physics can't explain why we love chocolate.
Nope. Our internal world runs on different rules. And a key part of that internal world is what he calls the Virtual Empirical Self, or VES.
That's like the me in my head, right?
Yeah, it's our sense of self, our ego. But he also says it's the source of both good and evil, which philosophers have been debating forever.
A double-edged sword of being self-aware.
Right, and then there's the properties of the things in our internal world. He says their meaning comes from our VES, not from physics. And how we perceive them depends on where we focus our attention, our mood, our beliefs.
So like if I'm stressed, I might perceive things more negatively.
Exactly, but then there's an even deeper level than the VES, the Virtual Absolute Self, or VAS. He also calls it the Virtual Core Self, VCS, or Pure Consciousness, PC.
Okay, this is getting deep. So what's that all about?
He says this VCS is what allows us to even have a virtual world in the first place. It's the foundation of consciousness. And he says this might be what people actually mean when they talk about God, especially those who see God as consciousness itself.
So God isn't a guy in the sky, but the very essence of awareness.
That's how he sees it.
Yeah.
And he distinguishes between, like, everyday consciousness, like listening to music, and this deeper, pure consciousness.
Right, like one is the content of our awareness, the other is the awareness itself.
Exactly. And he says that this pure consciousness is what makes us different from, like, rocks or robots. They can't feel or experience things the way we do.
He's saying consciousness is what makes us truly alive. And no matter how smart AI gets, it can't replicate that.
Right. He says this VCS or PC is a fundamental principle, like gravity, not a person or a thing. And he connects it to ideas in different religions, like Brahmanatman and Vedanta. It's all about that ultimate reality being pure consciousness.
And that's the basis of spirituality and happiness, according to him.
Yeah. And then he talks about how our beliefs, our faith, can actually affect our experiences, our minds, even our bodies.
Like the placebo effect. Believing something can make it real.
Exactly. He says that's why spiritual experiences and things like faith healing work, physics can't explain it, but our internal world can.
So our beliefs shape our reality, even physically.
And finally, he says this two-reality framework helps us understand those big mysteries. Heaven and hell, the soul, reincarnation, the meaning of life, what happens after death.
The questions everyone wants answers to.
He even talks about greed, how people try to get stuff from a higher power, like those visa temples in India where people pray for visas to go abroad. It's all about what we want.
It really is a fascinating way of looking at things. So to sum it all up, Dr. Kushwaha is saying there's the external world, the universe, and then there's our internal virtual world, shaped by our senses, our beliefs, and this thing he calls pure consciousness, which might be what some people call God.
It's like he's taking science, religion, personal experience, and blending it all into this new way of understanding reality.
Yeah, and it could be a bridge between believers and non-believers because it shifts the focus to our own internal experience, which is pretty radical when you think about it,
It really is. It comes from his own crazy journey, from faithful kid to skeptic to something totally different. And it leaves us with a lot to ponder.
for sure. So, listener, here's something for you to chew on. Does this idea of an internal virtual universe make sense to you? How does it fit with what you believe? Could this be a new way to think about God, consciousness, reality, and what does it mean if our beliefs are actually shaping our own personal reality? There's a lot to unpack there.
Definitely. A lot to think about.